On this edition of Veterans HealthWatch, we'll learn about sexual trauma experienced while serving in the military and the variety of services available to those veterans. We'll also learn about mental health care for all veterans, so please join us. Welcome to Veterans HealthWatch, a program sponsored by the VA Maryland healthcare system that provides the latest health and benefits information for Maryland's veterans, their family members, and the local community. I'm Kenya Griffin. Sometimes the wounds sustained in military service are not just from the enemy, but from those whom we serve with. Such is the case with military sexual trauma, or MST. And joining us to help us learn more about MST is Dr. Christine Kalmus, the MST coordinator for the VA Maryland healthcare system. Dr. Kalmus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
As I was preparing for this segment, I learned that MST, or military sexual trauma, is actually a term coined by the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little more about it and what is entailed when we talk about military sexual trauma?
Military sexual trauma is a broad term describing any sexual assault, as well as any unwanted repeated sexual harassment by a service member on active duty for training, or inactive duty for training. It does not matter who the perpetrator is. It could be a spouse, a fellow service member, or stranger. It also does not matter where the assault occurred, whether it's on or off base.
Okay. And I know this is surprising to people. Like I said, military sexual trauma is something we hear about within the VA, even though with the Me Too movement, we're hearing more about sexual assault.
Definitely.
In a general scope. Who's usually most affected by MST?
Really anyone, any service member can be affected by military sexual trauma. And we've really seen that the numbers across service areas, have remained pretty stable. On average, it's 1 in 100 males and 1 in 4 females that report the experience of military sexual trauma.
You mentioned the reporting, which we know is really important. So it sounds like MST is a new term, but the fact that it's happened isn't new.
No, not at all. And as I mentioned before, it's been occurring across eras, and the numbers have been pretty stable of those who've reported it. There are many more who do not report.
Okay. And so how long have you had the MST coordinators in the VA healthcare system?
The MST coordinators have been within the VA system for at least 10 to 15 years, if not longer. And that really demonstrates the VA's awareness and acknowledgement of military sexual trauma as a problem.
And let's talk about how the VA is helping those veterans recover from MST, or maybe the impact, I guess, of MST. So could you explain for us what you do in your role as a coordinator?
Yes, so part of my role is working directly with veterans who've experienced military sexual trauma to make sure that they are receiving and connected with the appropriate mental health services based upon how military sexual trauma has impacted them.
Okay.
The second main portion of my role is really working within the VA to make sure that all service providers are aware of military sexual trauma and how it impacts people so that they can provide sensitive care to the veterans that we're serving.
I want to go back to what you said about how MST, or military sexual trauma, impacts them. So your treatment is based on how the person has responded to the MST. Can you give an example?
Yes, exactly. And this is a really important point. So military sexual trauma, sexual assault is a traumatic experience. However, it does impact people differently. For some people, they will go on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, whereas others may struggle with depression or even substance use.
Okay.
So depending on how the experience of military sexual trauma has impacted them, that really directs where we would send them in terms of care, what clinic they would best serve them.
And do you have specific groups or groups specific to MST itself?
Yes, so there is a women's and a men's MST group.
Okay.
And there are two types. One is the 12-session weekly group. The second is a monthly drop-in group for women and a monthly drop-in group for men. This is for veterans who want to learn more about the longer 12-session group, as well as veterans who have completed the 12-session group who want ongoing support.
Okay, and this is a sensitive issue. So
Definitely.
And we want our veterans to know that the care is here for them, the support is here for them, but taking that first step it can be challenging.
Very difficult.
So what should a veteran do if they have experienced military sexual trauma and they want help?
Well, they can reach out to me directly, or they can let any provider know, and that provider can connect them to me as the MST coordinator. I will contact the veteran and talk about their difficulties and what services they feel they need. And I can be reached at 410-637-1231.
Okay, and you said that the clinicians have been trained
Yes.
to gently work
To
with the
discuss
veteran.
this in a sensitive way. Exactly.
Okay. Who's eligible for this care, or does it
Excellent
matter if you're in the
question.
healthcare system?
So veterans, most all veterans who've experienced military sexual trauma are eligible for at least care related to conditions that have developed because of military sexual trauma. So that is the majority of mental health conditions, as well as some physical health conditions. So typical length of service or income requirements do not apply. It does not matter if the individual did not report the MST at the time of service. It does not matter if they're service connected for the condition. All MST-related care for conditions thought to be influenced by the experience of military sexual trauma, is provided free of charge to veterans.
That is a great point. Thank you so much for telling us that.
Yes.
Well, we're going to take a short break. We hope you stay with us.
Yes.
We want to have someone join us to talk about all of the mental health services available to our veterans. So we're going to take a short break. Please stay with us.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I'm here to talk about military sexual trauma, or MST. That's VA's term for when someone is sexually assaulted or sexually harassed during their military service. People think of sexual assault as being violent, and it can be. But MST also includes very serious acts, such as being pressured into sex or being threatened, and any situation where you couldn't give consent, like being drugged, intoxicated, asleep, or unconscious. MST includes sexual harassment too, like sexual jokes about you, or being touched in ways that make you feel uncomfortable, or someone coming on to you repeatedly, or being promised something in exchange for sex, like better duty assignments. If any of these happen to you during military service, it's MST. It doesn't matter who the perpetrator was. It also doesn't matter why it happened. Even if it was called hazing or something normal, it's still MST. And MST is never your fault. About 1 in 4 women who use VA care have experienced MST, but almost half of all veterans in VA care who experienced MST are men. Please remember, you are not alone. VA is committed to supporting your path to healing too.
The doctors and counselors at VA are trained to provide the kinds of care proven to help with trauma. To learn more, call the main number of your VA and ask for the MST coordinator, or ask your current VA doctor.
Your local vet center is another great resource. MST-related counseling is available at vet centers.
Also, visit VA's MST website, read about VA services and veteran stories of recovery, and learn about getting help if you need it.
You don't have to go through MST alone. VA is here to help.
Welcome back to Veterans HealthWatch. We've been talking about military sexual trauma, or MST, with Dr. Christine Kalmus, and joining us is Dr. Aaron Jacoby, the Chief Psychologist in the Mental Health Program for the VA Maryland Healthcare System. Thank you both again for joining us. Back to you, Christine. We talked about MST, or military sexual trauma, your role as a coordinator. Remind us a little more about some of the services that are available to help those veterans who've experienced MST.
So there are an array of mental health services available, which my role is to connect veterans who've experienced MST with services based upon how that experience is currently impacting them. So there are different specialty clinics that I may refer to, for instance, for post-traumatic stress disorder or substance use difficulties. The MST specific services offered through the VA are a women's group and a men's group. Both the 12-session group, where veterans are learning skills to help them cope with difficulties that are common after the experience of MST, as well as the monthly drop-in group.
Okay. And I want to talk to you, Dr. Jacoby, about what Dr. Kalmus mentioned about the impact that MST, or military sexual trauma, can have on a veteran, and that's what you're helping to treat, the result of that trauma. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen as a common result of that trauma, of that trauma, and then how you help to treat those veterans?
Sure. As Dr. Kalmus had mentioned earlier, the immediate effects that often result from an individual who's experienced sexual trauma, individual can develop depression, sadness, often will feel very fearful of their environment, will isolate from others, and in some ways their world becomes very small. They will often cut off contact with loved ones, sometimes even feeling guilty or thinking about the trauma at times when they just don't want to think about it. The good news is that most people are very resilient. If they experience a trauma, they'll draw upon already their existing strengths and natural resources that they have within themselves to get through the struggle of being traumatized. People do that by connecting with others, by actually reaching out and talking with others who may have experienced the same sort of thing. And as they recover, they feel more comfortable, they feel less depressed, and they get more integrated into society.
But then you have the extended version of that, I should say. Where
some individuals really struggle. They get stuck with that natural recovery process, and then that's where really we come in to help people along with that process.
And so, Christine, I wanted to help our audience understand there's a military culture that the VA is trained to help. That's why the VA is here. We're trained to help those veterans. We understand those unique veteran experiences or those military experiences. So when we talk about military sexual trauma, I think we need to understand that culture, the culture of service and doing what you need to do or what you're told, and how living in that culture, and then where you're all supposed to support each other and help each other, but then someone's hurting you, how that is a little different. Can you help us to understand that?
Yes, I think that it can actually complicate the natural recovery process, because the person oftentimes can be somebody within service who is doing this, maybe somebody of higher rank. Therefore, some of the traumatic events may be repeated, occurring over time as opposed to just a single assault. Also, there can be discouragement from reporting or a lot of reasons why people are reluctant to report this experience. They may have witnessed colleagues or comrades who reported and had negative consequences. So sometimes it's overt and covert discouragement from reporting or getting the help that they need at the time that this is occurring.
And that's why I think it's a good point that you made. It doesn't matter when it occurred.
Exactly.
If you're still experiencing the trauma afterwards, or if you just need help coping.
Exactly.
To come to the VA.
Exactly.
And when should someone say, okay, now I know what the natural progression kind of looks like? When do they know it's time to get help?
Well, I mean, I think when anybody starts to have some challenges in either their work or in their schooling, or if they come in and they talk about having struggles in their interpersonal relationships with their marriage, with their children, those are the signs, when somebody really needs to come and talk with us so that we can help them navigate through that difficult time in their life.
And so, Christine, you talked about the groups. The group sessions. What's the benefit of talking with others who have a similar experience?
I find that piece of it to be so beneficial. Connecting with people who've had a similar experience and have similar symptoms and difficulties can be really eye-opening.
You're not alone.
Exactly. And that, in and of itself, is often very powerful.
And that's one of the things we notice about the VA, just in general, that the veterans feel comfortable around people who understand military language, even if you haven't suffered any injuries.
Exactly.
But just to chat with another veteran who understands your language is so helpful here.
Exactly.
And so, Aaron, what now about the screenings? We want to talk about. We said we're here to help, but how do you know that a veteran has suffered military sexual trauma? What can you tell us about the screening for that?
So there is a universal screening for every veteran who's coming into the VA about the experience of military sexual trauma. And the staff members here in the VA are trained on how to sensitively ask these questions. Oftentimes, that screening is what prompts people to report the experience of military sexual trauma and then seek treatment.
Okay, and so when we talk about that screening and seeking treatment, we don't want veterans to wait to be asked if they need help. So let's remind our viewers and our veterans the steps they should take, or what the resources are available to them to get that help.
Definitely. They can tell a provider, any provider, that they're struggling with experiences that may be related to military sexual trauma, or they can call me directly as the MST coordinator. Again, my phone number is 410-637-1231. And for service members or veterans who are not enrolled in the VA, the very first step would be to enroll in the VA.
Absolutely.
Come here and fill out paperwork to enroll, or go online and enroll.
Absolutely, and going online is much easier now than it was in the years past to enroll. And what about mental health services, Dr. Jacoby?
The good news is that we have mental health services across our entire system here at all three of our major facilities, as well as all of our community-based outpatient clinics. Essentially, a veteran can talk to their primary care provider, they can talk to a psychologist in primary care mental health integration, or they can actually present to our mental health triage clinic to essentially enroll in mental health care.
I just want to emphasize that the experience of military sexual trauma is very common, and there are treatments that are very effective in helping people get back to the lives that they want to be living.
Great. That's good news. That's a great point to end
Yes.
this segment on. What about you, Dr. Jacoby?
I can only concur with that, and the good news is the treatments that we have in place do work. The reason why we know that is that veterans tell us that they work, and we know that when people come here, they're going to get the help they need.
Great. As I said, we're going to take a short break, but when we return, we'll learn more about the array of mental health services available to our veterans, so please stay tuned.
The telephone care line is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
If you've got a question about medication, diabetes, your diagnosis, any concerns, you can always give us a call. People want to hear a live voice and not the machine. We're always there to answer your questions. Give us a call.
800 865-2441 and press 1 to speak to a nurse. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A nurse is happy to help you.
Welcome back to Veterans HealthWatch. In our previous segments, we've been exploring the services available to veterans who've experienced MST, or military sexual trauma, and the mental health care available to them. So to continue that conversation about the array of mental health services available to our veterans is Dr. Aaron Jacoby. Dr. Jacoby, thanks again for joining me.
My pleasure.
And we hear the term mental health used much more frequently than we have in the past. But I want our viewers to understand a little bit more, what do we mean when we say mental health?
It's a great question. Mental health really is the emotional and social well-being of an individual. So when we're talking about people improving their mental health, we're really talking about improving self-care.
Okay.
So doing things that are going to reduce your stress, help you handle life's problems and struggles easier, and really using your social connections to support you through that process.
That clarifies a lot when you talk about mental health, meaning or just encompassing how you feel, how you interact with others, because we want to reduce that stigma associated with mental health. So having a better understanding of what it means can go a long way.
Definitely.
So how does someone know when they need help with those areas in mental health? When do they say, okay, I'm not handling this well on my own?
So, when we see somebody who's really starting to struggle in their life in a number of different areas, most of us really put a lot of value in our ability to work and work consistently. So if somebody starts to notice that they either don't feel like going into work, or they're taking a lot more sick leave, or when they're in the job, having problems concentrating, not focusing on doing their work, that's a warning sign. Okay. Another warning sign is if somebody is starting to have some difficulties interacting with their family members, with their loved ones, if they're having more arguments, if they're finding that they don't want to really be around people, they want to isolate. We want to make sure that when somebody is experiencing those sorts of things, that they come and they talk to us so that we can help them through the process.
And tell us a little bit about that help, the help that you offer.
Well, the good news is, here at VAMX, we have mental health services across the entire organization. So at all 3 of our major medical centers, Perry Point, Lock Raven, as well as Baltimore, at all of our community-based outpatient clinics, we have mental health services available. And those can be outpatient services, traditional, where somebody will come in as an outpatient and come to a once weekly or once monthly session with a therapist or a clinician. They can actually access higher level services, things like intensive outpatient programs, where they might actually come 3 or 4 times a week for about 4 hours a day and really be immersed in a program. We also offer residential services here. So if somebody feels that they need to spend anywhere between 30 and 90 days living at our Perry Point facility, we have over 200 residential beds.
What does that process look like for someone? We talk about taking that first step is usually the hardest step. So if a veteran's saying, okay, I'm listening to you, I'm having these difficulties, how do they just step out and make that first connection? And then what would that process look like for them?
Well, it's a fantastic question. We encourage veterans to talk to their providers here. So if they're talking to their primary care provider, they'll discuss, those issues there. We have walk-in clinics where people can come in on, Monday through Friday throughout the day and talk to a mental health provider. Really, the first step is just talking to people about what's going on with you, and then we can work collaboratively, really with a recovery-oriented model, using the veterans' strengths and their own resources to help them navigate difficult times in their lives.
And when you say talk to your provider, should they schedule an appointment, or if they already have an appointment scheduled, bring it up during that appointment?
Exactly. They can talk about it in already scheduled appointments. So like I said, we have walk-in clinics where people can come in Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. till 4:30, and talk with a mental health provider who's here to help them.
Excellent. And I mentioned the stigma. We hear so much more about mental health and self-care, as you mentioned. So I would assume the stigma is being reduced a little. Do you have people reaching out for help more often? What is that looking like on your end?
We do. We have veterans as well as their family members reaching out, trying to connect them with care. I think the shift from using a more recovery-oriented approach with our veterans has been really helpful, because in the past people used to think that mental health struggles were something to be ashamed of. Now we know that everyone experiences, some sadness and anxiety in their lives, and part of good, self-care is to actually talk about those problems and to be openly discuss it, and then also really capitalize off what are their strengths and things you have in your life that are already going well. Let's make sure that those go well and use those to improve how they're doing.
I know that VA is also trying to tap into technology to help our veterans. We service the VA Maryland healthcare system, service most of Maryland. How is the VA leveraging that technology to get the care to our veterans that they need?
Well, we've been using a lot more telemental health, especially for our veterans that live in rural areas. It used to be where people had a hard time getting into care, especially if they lived on our eastern shore or other rural areas. They can now go to a community-based outpatient clinic that's near their home, and we have providers at our major facilities who actually use telemental health, and they'll beam into the community-based outpatient clinic and be able to do the session via technology.
So I'm going to need you to explain that. You say beam in, I see holograms and everything. But when you say telemental health, can you kind of visually describe how that works?
Definitely. So a veteran will go into a private room, confidential room. There'll be a video monitor there, and they'll actually see their provider on that video monitor. They'll be at another location with their own video monitor connecting directly with that veteran. Okay. Initially, people were a little concerned that maybe people wouldn't want to do that, and veterans, when they do telemental health, they love it. They loved the ease of being able to go locally to a facility and then connecting with a provider that can be more than an hour away.
And again, leveraging that technology to bring the access to care. We have FaceTime and so many other ways we're kind of becoming accustomed to the variety of ways that we can communicate.
Yeah, we want to stay on the cutting edge so that that veterans access our services in any way they can.
For a family member or friend of a veteran who they feel that their loved one is experiencing some issues, what guidance can you give to them to help seek that assistance a veteran needs?
It's a great question. Actually, family members have a lot of different ways that they can connect. One of the things that they can do is go on our VA Maryland webpage, and there's a whole host of resources that are available to our veterans that they can learn about. Another thing they can do is actually call our crisis line, which is 1-800-273-8255. That line is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and family members can call, especially if they're really concerned about their veteran, talk with a mental health clinician and get some guidance about the resources that are available to their veteran.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Jacoby. I want to give you an opportunity if there's anything that you would like to share to our veterans and to our viewers about mental health services.
Definitely. I can't underscore the fact that we have many mental health treatments that work extremely well. And again, the reason why we know that is that the veterans tell us that they do. So I encourage everybody to connect with care. We're here to help.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jacoby.
Great. It was my pleasure. Thanks.
That wraps up the show for today. If you have questions about today's show or would like to make suggestions for future topics, please give us a call, or you could visit our website, join us on Facebook or Twitter. We love to hear from you. And remember, if you know a veteran or you are a veteran who's not using the VA Maryland healthcare system, please connect with us. We're here to serve you. Please join us next time.
Volunteering is an opportunity to show your patriotism.
Most importantly, it's a good feeling knowing that you're helping those who have already served.
And it's always an honor and a privilege to me to be there, because I know that I get to help the men and the women who have served us.
So if you're interested in volunteering with us, best thing is to get in contact with us through our webpage, or you can also call us.
It really, really gives me an opportunity to give back, make a difference.